Hi everyone, it's John. Welcome back to my channel. When I bought few dozen books from Princeton University Press earlier in the year, I mentioned it in one of my videos, but as of now I haven't shown any of the books that I bought from there. I want to use this video as sort of a first installment to show you 8 of the books that I bought, and I'll intersperse these over the next couple of months. Right now I'm planning on showing these in 4 different videos. Intersperse these with some book reviews. I like to focus on those. But I'm thinking every third week for the next 2 or 3 months I will do another installment until I'm all done. So this is installment 1, like I said, 8 books, a little bit of everything here, a little bit of history, a little bit of history of science, a little bit of Eastern religion, and hopefully some stuff that interests you. What I'll do, as always, when I talk about new books is read you the little sort of media matter that comes attached to the books on Princeton University Press's site. And sometimes they have, that obligatory, this amazing, new, and wonderful book. Sorry about that. It's just, they're trying to push their wares, so they're obligated to use language like that. I'm just going to read what they have, so I didn't write it. But some of these books I can just only tell you a few sentences about, only so much that I know I've wanted to read them and have had them on my to-purchase list for a while, but for whatever reason before now hadn't actually had an opportunity to buy them, whether it's because they were too expensive or I'd never seen a clean, unused, unmarked copy before, or whatever else. But let me just get started showing you, and hopefully you see something that you like. First up is one of those books, like I mentioned, that I've never managed to find an affordable copy of, despite the fact that I don't think it's ever gone out of print. This is Joseph Strayer's On the Medieval Origins of the Modern State. And, by the way, I wanted to mention one more thing. All 8 books I'll be telling you about today are from this imprint. It's a particular imprint at Princeton. I don't know if you can see it right here. It says Princeton Classics. Let me just tell you a little bit about what Princeton Classics are. By my count, and I will leave a link in the drop-down box in case you're interested in Princeton University Press generally, or especially the classics. They are 50 books. Whether they were originally published by Princeton University or not, I don't know. But Princeton has bought the rights to them and has reprinted them under their own imprimatur in sort of a sign of saying, we think these books are really important in their field, have a lot of scholarly significance, or have influenced the field in sort of very large, important, interesting ways, and we want to put our name on it and advertise how important we think it is. So like I said, it's 50 books. All of the 8 books I'll be talking about in this video belong to that Princeton Classics series. So these are books deemed by Princeton to be important enough to have the word Princeton Classic on it. So, like I already showed you, this is On the Medieval Origins of the Modern State. The modern state, however we conceive of it today, is based on a pattern that emerged in Europe in the period from 1100 to 1600. Inspired by a lifetime of teaching and research, On the Origins of the Modern State is a classic work on what is known about the early history of the European state. In this clear, short book, Strayer explores the European state in its infancy, especially its institutional developments in the administration of justice and finance. Forewords from Charles Tilly, who's another important scholar when it comes to the formation of medieval governance, and William Chester Jordan demonstrate the perennial importance of Joseph Strayer's book and situate it within a contemporary context. Tilly demonstrates how Strayer's work has set the agenda for a whole generation of historical analysts, not only in medieval history but also in the comparative study of state formation. William Chester Jordan's foreword examines the scholarly and pedagogical setting within which Strayer produced this book and how this both enhanced its accessibility and informed its focus on primarily English and French accomplishments in early state formation. A really thin book, all of about 110 pages, but like I said, one that I've always wanted to get my hands on, and was absolutely elated to see that Princeton had republished. Next up, this was a big theme going through, not necessarily these 8 books, but the 35 or so others I bought from Princeton earlier this year, and that is the history of science. Did a lot of history of science buying. Filled some big gaps in my library. I was very, very happy to fill. And this is one of them. Really one of the... let's see when this was published. I don't remember. 1985 sounds about right. This is by Stephen Shapin and Simon Schaefer, and it is Leviathan and the Air Pump. You can see the subtitle there. Hobbes, Boyle, and the Experimental Life. Leviathan and the Air Pump examines the conflicts over the value and propriety of experimental methods between 2 major 17th century thinkers, Thomas Hobbes, author of the political treatise Leviathan, and vehement critic of systematic experimentation in natural philosophy, and Robert Boyle, mechanical philosopher and owner of the newly invented air pump. The issues at stake in their disputes ranged from the physical integrity of the air pump to the intellectual integrity of the knowledge it might yield. Both Hobbes and Boyle were looking for ways of establishing knowledge that did not decay into ad hominem attacks and political division. Boyle proposed the experiment as cure. He argued that facts should be manufactured by machines like the air pump so that gentlemen could witness the experiments and produce knowledge that everyone agreed on. Hobbes, by contrast, looked for natural law and viewed experiments as the artificial, unreliable products of an exclusive guild. The new approaches taken in Leviathan and the Air Pump have been enormously influential on historical studies of science. Shapin and Schaefer found a moment of scientific revolution and showed how key scientific givens, like facts, interpretations, the idea of what an experiment is, truth, were really fundamental to a new political order. Shapin and Schaefer were also innovative in their ethnographic approach. Attempting to understand the work habits, rituals, and social structures of a remote, unfamiliar group, they argued that politics were tied up in what scientists did, rather than just what they said. Stephen Shapin and Simon Schaefer used the confrontation between Hobbes and Boyle as a way of understanding what was at stake in the early history of scientific experimentation. They describe the protagonists' divergent views of natural knowledge and situate the Hobbes-Boyle disputes within contemporary debates over the role of intellectuals in public life and the problems of social order and ascent in Restoration England. In a new introduction, the authors describe how science and its social contexts were understood when this book was first published, and how the study of the history of science has changed since then. Well, that introduction is more fully fleshed out than most of them are, as you can tell from the medieval origins of the modern state. And it has details in it, I hadn't read it until now, that make me even more curious to read the book. I just kind of thought it was maybe something like a dual intellectual biography of Thomas Hobbes and Boyle, and inside of sort of like the invention of the air pump. This sounds like it's much more about the ideas about experimentation and the scientific method and stuff like that, which of course I always thought would be there too. But this introduction is bringing a lot of ideas that make it sound even more interesting. So that might have to move its way up on my list. All right, next is a book that you might not know by an author you probably do know of, maybe indirectly. This is The Struggle for Equality, and this has a subtitle: Abolitionists and the Negro in the Civil War and Reconstruction. And I apologize for the dated language there. This was first published in 1964. So, yeah, instead of African American, that word was still in common parlance. So, I think this was actually possibly the expanded book form of James Mcpherson, who is the writer's PhD dissertation. Could be wrong about that, but James Mcpherson is the guy who wrote A Battle Cry for Freedom. Possibly, besides Shelby Foote's Civil War trilogy, maybe one of the best known books ever written about the Civil War. This is all about what the title talks about. Originally published in 1964, The Struggle for Equality presents an incisive and vivid look at the abolitionist movement and the legal basis it provided to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Fascinating that he wrote it, published it right at the height of the civil rights movement. Pulitzer Prize-winning historian James Mcpherson explores the role played by civil rights activists during and after the Civil War, and their evolution from despised fanatics into influential spokespersons for the radical wing of the Republican Party. Asserting that it was not abolitionists who failed to instill principles of equality, but rather the American people who refused to follow their leadership, Mcpherson raises questions about the obstacles that have long hindered American reform movements. This new Princeton Classic edition marks the 50th anniversary of the book's initial publication and includes a new preface by the author. So, again, the tie-in there with more modern reform movements of the late 19th and early 20th century makes it all the more interesting to think about reading. Next on the list, some religious history. This is one that has been inspired by my recent forays into a podcast that I told you about a few weeks ago. My favorite podcast of all time, which is called History of Philosophy Without Any Gaps by Peter Adamson. Peter Adamson did a long, extensive series of talks about philosophy of the Islamic world. He doesn't call it Arabic philosophy because not all philosophers that should be included were actually Arabic, but they did all. The better term for it is philosophy of the Islamic world, because they were all Muslim. But anyway, enough about that. You can go watch that video if you're interested in the podcast. But one of the great books to come out of the sort of renaissance of not capital R Renaissance, but lowercase Renaissance of of that region and that time period is a book by Ibn Khaldun, and it's called the Mukhedimah. The subtitle is An Introduction to History, and this is not, of course, originally part of the title, but the classic Islamic history of the world. The Mukhedimah, often translated as Introduction or Prolegomena, is the most important Islamic history of the pre-modern world. Written by the great 14th century Arab scholar Ibn Khaldun, who died in 1406. This monumental work established the foundations of several fields of knowledge, including philosophy of history, sociology, ethnography, and economics. The first complete English translation by the eminent Islamicist and interpreter of Arabic literature Franz Rosenthal was published in 3 volumes in 1958 as part of the Bollingen series and received immediate acclaim in the United States and abroad. This is a 1-volume version of Rosenthal's masterful translation, which first appeared in 1969. The Princeton Classics edition of this version includes Rosenthal's original introduction as well as a contemporary introduction by Bruce B. Lawrence. This volume makes available a seminal work of Islam and medieval and ancient history to 21st century audiences. The Mukhedimah is sort of one of those big polymathic books that comes out of Islamic philosophy of the period and is important. So I wanted to have a copy of it. Next is one of 2 books that I have by Heinrich Zimmer, and they have a couple of more actually on the PUP site, but these were the 2 that I was immediately interested in. The first one is Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization by Heinrich Zimmer. Zimmer, this is one of the books that is quite a bit older than the others. This was originally published in 1946. So, a landmark work that demystifies the rich tradition of Indian art. Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization analyzes key motifs found in legend, myth, and folklore taken directly from the Sanskrit. It provides a comprehensive introduction to visual thinking and picture reading in Indian art and thought. Ultimately, the book shows that profound Hindu and Buddhist intuitions on the riddles of life and death are universally recognizable. And to sort of supplement that in a way, the much chunkier, and also by Hans Zimmer, his Philosophies of India. Since its first publication, and that was in 1951, also part of the Bollingen series, by the way, Philosophies of India has been considered a monumental exploration of the foundations of Indian philosophy. Based on the copious notes of Indologist, linguist, and art historian Heinrich Zimmer, and edited by Joseph Campbell, this book is organized into 3 sections. The Highest Good looks at Eastern and Western thought and their convergence. The Philosophies of Time discusses the philosophies of success, pleasure, and duty. And the Philosophies of Eternity presents the fundamental concepts of Buddhism, Brahmanism, Jainism, Sikhya, and Yoga, and Tantra. It also examines such areas as the Buddhist Tantras, Buddhist Genesis, and Tantric presentation of divinity, the preparation of disciples, and the meaning of initiation, and the symbolism of the mandala palace, tantric ritual, and twilight language. It delves into the tantric teachings of the inner zodiac and the fivefold ritual symbolism of passion. Appendices, a bibliography, and general and Sanskrit indexes are included. So I had one comparative religion class, which in school, which was a semester long, and what I thought was a much too short introduction to, I guess what you could broadly call Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, a little bit of Shinto, a little bit of Zen, and it was just enough to make me dangerous to want to pick up other things. But usually when you go into a bookstore and you go into the section that has Eastern religion, it's painfully sort of incestuous with a lot of New Age woo bullshit, which I avoid like the plague. So it's nice being able to see something at Princeton that you know, albeit dated, has been influential in the field and is written by a scholar, even though some of his conclusions may or may not have been superseded by other scholarship. But yeah, it's kind of a dangerous area to read in, because Eastern religion has been so appropriated in the United States over the last couple of generations that you get a lot of people writing about it who are not interested in a scholarly approach at all. So two more. This is another book I was so thrilled to find. For once, a book by an author I've already reviewed on this channel, though obviously it's not a review of this book. This is a book by Sheldon Wolin, and this is his Politics and Vision, Continuity and Innovation in Western Political Thought. Another very, very large book. The print is also quite small. Let me give you the publication date here. Wow, was it 1960? Wow, that sounds quite a bit older than I thought. 61 years old. Politics and Vision. Politics and Vision is a landmark work. There's more of that language again. A landmark work by one of the great thinkers of the 20th century. This is a significantly expanded edition of one of the greatest works of modern political theory. Sheldon Wolin's Politics and Vision inspired and instructed two generations of political theorists after its appearance in 1960. Substantially expanded for republication in 2004, it is both a sweeping survey of Western political thought and a powerful account of contemporary predicaments of power and democracy. In lucid and compelling prose, Sheldon Wolin offers an original, subtle, and often surprising interpretation of political theorists from Plato to Rawls, situating them historically while sounding their depths. He critically engages their diverse accounts of politics, theory, power, justice, citizenship, and institutions. The new chapters, which show how thinkers have grappled with the immense possibilities and dangers of modern power, are themselves a major theoretical statement. They culminate in Wolin's remarkable argument that the United States has invented a new political form called inverted totalitarianism, in which economic rather than political power is dangerously dominant. In this expanded edition, the book that helped to define political theory in the late 20th century should energize, enlighten, and provoke generations of scholars to come. The book that I did review by Sheldon Wolin is I'm not forgetting. I'm not remembering the name. If you're interested, you can search Wolin, Wolin, on my channel. It will pop right up. But it's that book that he wrote about inverted totalitarianism. Um, I reviewed it 10 years ago, so I don't remember the name exactly. But I do remember loving the book. And it's a fascinating thesis, too, by the way. One more. Another large book with shockingly small print. Yikes. I already can't see, but apparently I'm going to go even more blind in the service of scholarship. Okay. This is R.R. Palmer's The Age of Democratic Revolution, A Political History of Europe and America, 1760 to 1800. And this is a little bit 2014? Okay. That's the oldest date I'm seeing, so maybe it is newer, 2014. For the Western world, the period from 1760 to 1800 was the Great Revolutionary Era, in which the outlines of the democratic state came into being. Here, for the first time in one volume, is R.R. Palmer's magisterial account of this incendiary age. Palmer argues that the American, French, and Polish revolutions, and the movements for political change in Britain, Ireland, Holland, and elsewhere, were manifestations of similar political ideas, needs, and conflicts. Palmer traces the clash between an older form of society marked by legalized social rank and heredity or self-perpetuating elites, and a new form of society that placed a greater value on social mobility and legal equality. So those are 8 books. That's 8 down and probably 35 to go. Like I said, I will give it a couple of weeks post edition 2, volume 2 of all the books that I got there, and 2 more reviews, volume 3, etc. And with that said, I will see you next Wednesday.